Hi everyone, welcome to TLDR Week 3 for Advanced Security. This week we're going to be talking about enumeration. At the end of the week, you should be able to explain the purpose of social engineering and know the difference between phishing and spear phishing. You should know how to use ping, and you should know how to avoid detection during the mapping process and look at some of the tools that are used for enumeration and recording of baselines. So last week, what we ended up talking about was reconnaissance, trying to find information about the company. In this case, it is a fake company, Acme Corporation. This week, we're going to be talking about enumeration, which is the next step in pen testing, where we are taking the information that we found during recon so that we can work on capturing and tracking information so that we can make a battle plan. A battle plan is basically the point in pen testing where you are trying to figure out how you are going to perform your pen test. Now, if we think about the company Acme Corporation, we have to do the recon portion so that we can see the footprint of the company, because if we don't know that much about the company, we won't be able to know how to do our pen test. After we have that information, we have to figure out how we are going to capture and track specific bits of information after the recon phase. So if recon is figuring out what kind of servers they have based off of, let's say, OSINT, then the enumeration is being able to track this info and find maybe, say, the IP addresses of their servers. So this is a deeper recon, but it's more focused on what we know about the actual company Acme Corp rather than just trying to figure out what Acme Corp is. The recon portion is really just trying to figure out who is Acme Corp and how is their business put together. Enumeration is where we have a more focused vision of the company and then trying to find information from there. Now, we want to think about the pen test in terms of how we are going to go about choosing targets and then make a plan for how we are going to do the next phase of our pen test. One of the things that's really important during this pen test is we have to figure out what information we have, what information we need, and then we have to figure out in our battle plan what is the progression of how we're getting this information. Now, it is important to remember that because we are talking about ethical hacking, this is not let's go hack people. What we are looking at is how we can find information about the company and what information is the company Acme Corp actually showing so that we can help them protect themselves. So we could start looking at the targets and we can sort of split this up into the softer targets, wetware, people, and the harder targets such as servers and devices. So we could start looking at targets such as maybe we want to look at jobs, maybe we want to look at the C-suite people, CEO, CFO, CTO, CISO, all of those jobs. Maybe they are going to be a good target, in which case maybe we want to talk about a plan for spear phishing. We do, of course, have to remember that our plan, we want to make sure that we are starting as non-invasive as possible. So if we are trying to get information about the company, we don't want to go directly towards trying to get access, the exploitation phase, because if we can find information without alerting them as to what we're doing, then that's going to go a lot better for us later. Now, when we are choosing our targets, we might end up choosing people, specific people or jobs. We might also end up choosing different pieces of hardware. So think about a fake company such as Acme Corporation, and then think about potential targets. Come up with a list of reasons as to why they're potential targets. Now, obviously, this is going to be fake as there is no such thing as Acme Corporation outside of Looney Tunes, but if you think about the general job, let's say the general job of people that are in the C suite. So, C suite is going to be CEO, CFO, things like that, the executives. Now, think about the general job of those executives, and then think about the positives and negatives to choosing each of those people. Let's say, for example, the CEO of Acme Corporation is the Roadrunner. Now, if we have the CEO, well, they are high enough up in the company that they are likely to be able to make a lot of decisions, but also conversely, they are probably going to have a lot more protections in place for the ability to make those decisions. So, if you do something like a spear phishing attack on a CEO, that's more likely to draw attention than something like a phishing attack on a sales department of Acme Corporation. So, you want to think about both the sort of positives and negatives to choosing those targets. Now, because we're doing this against Acme Corporation, the fake corporation, you're going to have to generalize based off of what you know about those jobs. One of the things that you could do if you don't know much about those jobs and you've never worked in a corporate environment before, completely fine, then you could start doing some research into what jobs are listed in the C suite, what is some general organization of companies, and then start thinking at try to find at least one positive and one negative to each of the potential targets that you find for those general organization charts. Now, we want to think about this in terms of layers. So, if we have a battle plan of how we want to perform our pen test, we want to have layers into our battle plan so that if something goes wrong, it's not like the whole thing blows up in our faces. We want to think about what is most likely to be detected versus least likely, talk about having a timing for this, and then we want to think about how we would actually go about this during the exploitation and web exploitation phase. So we want to think about things that are most likely or least likely to be detected. So let's say, for example, we are talking about a phishing attack. So, if you have a phishing attack and your entire company undergoes a phishing attack, then you would have a reasonable idea that somebody is trying to actually attack your company. Now, they could be attacking it for a number of different reasons, but you're probably going to be alerted. And if you send the same phishing email to every single person in that company, it is likely going to set off some variety of alarm and security system. So we want to think about the more non-invasive options. So another example is we could look at this like websites. So if we think about asking a website, hey website, what kind of code were you written in? Now, that's not going to set off any alarms because we can actually go to any website, right click on the page of the website, view the source code, and that's a relatively normal thing to do for certain values of normal. And so by seeing that source code, we're not actually setting off any alarms. And if we find out that the website is, for example, done in WordPress, that gives us some very valuable information. And asking the website what they were created with, such as WordPress, isn't going to set anything off. However, if you have a website and you try to say do something very dumb like brute force passwords, that's going to set things off. And that's the point where somebody is going to hopefully have red flags that shoot up that say, hey, I think somebody is attacking us. So it's important that as we come up with our plan, we want to make sure that we have different layers to our plan so we aren't just sort of tossing everything at once. Now, social engineering is one of the really interesting things that has been starting to get more and more popular as we do more protections in security and more people do pen tests. Now, part of what makes social engineering really difficult is because you have to actually educate people. You can't just tell, say, a server to not do something. Social engineering means that we're going to have things like, for example, phishing emails, vishing emails, or social media attacks. Now, you can actually see some examples of this. For example, as you all may or may not know, I'm a Doctor Who nerd. If you look at the episode The Bells of St. John, you can actually see how Clara is able to find out where the alien race is attacking from based off of using social media. If you haven't already seen it, definitely recommend. Now, we can see this in some other ways as well. All of you have probably gotten a phishing email at some point. There's different levels of phishing emails. There's the sort of casual, please click here type of thing. There's the more concentrated, click here because somebody's uploaded photos. But we might also end up having phishing emails that are more tailored to the company. So if you've ever worked for a company that does, ISO certifications or something like that, one of the ways that you'll sometimes see phishing emails happen is they are tailoring the email specifically to a thing the company might worry about. Vishing is another form of social engineering, except we do it on a phone call. Now, if you are interested in this, there's actually a whole track from DEF CON, which I've linked to DEF CON in Blackboard, but you can actually also Google, say, DEF CON 27 social engineering track, and they have some interesting resources and videos and stuff of examples of social engineering. Now, another thing that some people have actually started trying to do is map social sites so that they can figure out information using a script rather than doing it by hand. Now, it is important to note that using any of these types of attacks, such as the attack service mapper, that's completely against the terms of service. So you're breaking the terms of service by doing that. What this ends up doing is it allows you to see what people are sharing on social media. If you don't go on social media that much, I hate to say I would encourage it, but I would say go look at what people are willing to share on social media. The amount of TMI or too much information is surprising. And so that's kind of the thing that we are trying to protect against. Now, let's say we want to look at hardware. Now, if we're talking about trying to come up with an enumeration plan for hardware, we might end up looking at things like servers or operating systems. Now, I'd like to make a note here that even though I have two tools listed on the screen, I do not want you to use these tools. These are tools that can potentially be very dangerous, and do not do them if you are not under supervision. Normally, in class, you would be under supervision while we try it. However, because this is online, please do not use Nmap or ZenMap. That can lead to some really big problems. So if we are looking at hardware, we can come up with plans such as trying to figure out which ports are open on a server, information about the system, the operating system that's being run. We might also be able to figure out things like the location of the hardware or the networking structure. Another really common one is actually forgotten hardware. So one of the things that you can do that's interesting and disturbing all at the same time is a lot of printers are actually internet connected devices now. Now, what makes this interesting is printers tend to not be updated that much, and they aren't really treated like they are internet connected devices in that they don't tend to have a lot of the same protections that other devices would have. So if we had, for example, we were going about doing our enumeration, finding the bigger picture of the company, and we are able to find that there are some packets being transferred to a printer, we might be able to find information about that printer, such as the brand, the model, things like that, and then that would be able to give us more information about the network structure of the company. So those are some things that we might be able to look for. Now, with all of these, we also have to think about avoiding detection. We have to know how attackers are attacking, and we also have to know how attackers are avoiding being detected. So, some of the ways that hackers will avoid being detection is they'll do things like stealth mode. Now, Nmap, the thing that I'm telling you not to use, tends to be loud. If you are interested, Hack5, HAK5, actually has some really good tutorials showing how Nmap works, and because they've already created those, you can watch them. I've linked that in Blackboard so that you can actually go watch those if you're interested. You can also Google, and they have a bunch of really good tutorials. But one of the things that you'll see with Nmap is that it's considered loud. That means there's a lot of things that you can do with Nmap that will set off numerous red flags, and it's more likely that somebody will say either block your IP address, realize they are being attacked, and during a pen test, if somebody at the company realizes the pen test is happening, that makes everything a lot more difficult. Now, some other things that we can do is things like spoofing, so we can have it look like things are coming from other areas. We might also be able to do things with decoys and distractions. So, if you are poking one server in a louder way, they might go and protect that server, whereas leaving the one that you are actually trying to find info about more unprotected or not paying as much attention to it. Some people will also do things with something called volume attacks, where they will try to hide what they're doing in something like a DDoS style attack. So, those are some of the ways that you will sometimes see people trying to avoid detection for both actual hacking and during a pen test. If you would like to learn more about any of these, there are resources in Blackboard. You can also just Google them. And I did skip the two activities that we would normally do in class as they are not safe to do not under supervision. Sorry about that, but please feel free to continue going through the Blackboard and let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.